Hello, welcome everybody. We are back, and this episode is something that I think will be interesting to talk about because you also have mentioned to me that you get a lot of people maybe questioning your choice in what you're focusing on with your coaching. So maybe we can just jump into it and start with why do you work with men specifically, and how did you even get to that decision?
Yeah, the question I get a lot, which I think is a totally fair question, is how can I, as a cis woman, coach men on masculinity? Which I think is a very fair question. Um, and so why I work with men is sort of a multitude of reasons. So I'll tell you some of them. And one of them is that I just think that men are grossly underserved in our society on this healing journey as we're trying to evolve out of the emotional dark ages. I think it's easy to scapegoat men, call them toxic, blame them. And while I'm all for the rise of the divine feminine and feminine power, I don't think it has to be at the expense of the divine masculine. I think it's more about empowering everybody anywhere they are on any gender spectrum to step into their authentic alignment and their most magnetic lives in support and collaboration with each other. And I work with men also because I really resonate well with men. We talked about in the first episode my journey with neurodivergence and growing up a little bit unusual. And I always really got along well with the boys. And the men, I tend to be very blunt and to the point and direct. And I think men value that. And so we sort of have a natural compatibility. And I also think that I have both experienced a lot of trauma and pain from wounded or conditioned masculinity. And I have also equally participated in the wounding of the masculine in my less skillful levels of awareness. So for me, it feels a lot more fun and empowering to figure out what the problem is and how to fix it than be a victim or stay in some sort of a weakened mindset. So yeah, and honestly, when I transitioned to coaching full time, I just got referral after referral after referral from men, which really surprised me because my focus was going to be couples. I was going to be a couples coach. And yet man after man kept coming into my clientele basis. And I started observing so many similar patterns, and so many men were telling me the same thing. Sometimes 2 or 3 men a day would tell me the same thing, but they all felt like they were the only ones who felt that way. And that shame and that pain of isolation and feeling like they're bad or wrong or the only one like that, I think is a big misconception. So I
So with
decided to
the
launch the
moving
magnetic masculinity.
So moving into the from couples to men, what was the feedback from men that were working with you? Maybe why is it that they like to work with you, or why was it that they would refer others?
Well, I think that we're just sort of at this point in humanity where we're really at this big like evolutionary leap right now. We're really like raising the level of consciousness and evolving out of the emotional dark ages. So first of all, I think there's more men that are seeking help, and we've started to create more, not perfectly, but more of a culture if we focus on the progress rather than perfection. We're creating a culture where it's okay for men to ask for help and seek help. And I think they're maybe at a point where the pain of staying the same is outweighing the pain or the embarrassment or the social stigma of reaching out to help. And as far as their feedback when working with me, I think it's been helpful to have that sort of that blunt, straight to the point, direct, results focused aspect of me, but also bringing my empathy and compassion and my intuition and my nurturing into that space to create a safe place for them to heal and step into their full potential.
So one thing that I wanted to ask, because what you said that now it's, let's say the environment is more friendly for men to ask for help. What did you say to somebody who might think that them asking for help makes them maybe like less masculine?
Yes, a lot of men do feel that way, which is valid. I know I still do work with women as well, just predominantly men, but women also feel that way, less so. But I think that there's nothing braver and more, if we redefine what masculinity, or what I call magnetic masculinity, means as we step into this new era, I think there's nothing braver and more manly than vulnerability, personal growth, and being willing to ask for help. Because being wise or being brilliant or being excellent doesn't mean knowing everything. It means being willing to go and seek out information to help us continuously grow and evolve as beings.
So with what kind of men do you work with, or what are some of the things that you're helping them with?
Lots of different things. I enjoy variety, but some of the underlying common patterns that I see are what I call helping men bridge the gap between achievement and fulfillment. So I've worked with lots of men. I've worked with men experiencing homelessness or addiction, but I've also had clienteles of PhDs, CEOs, millionaires, entrepreneurs, several countries. And it doesn't seem to matter to them how much they achieve, how many boxes they check. They still feel lonely, misunderstood, like something is missing and they don't know what it is. They might have tried meditation, mindfulness, therapy, coaching, self-help books. A lot of them have started trying things like plant medicine, different things that are trending right now, but they still just feel empty. A lot of them struggle with imposter syndrome, or what we call imposter syndrome, which a lot of people actually have that in common. And what they desire is more confidence, more clarity. They want that authenticity, that emotional mastery, that vulnerability, that skillful in relationships. And I would say something else that's very common is they come thinking one thing is the problem, but not being aware that something else is the problem. Or they tell me they don't know what the problem is, but they know that there's more, there's something more, and they want it.
So in a way, through that work with you, you help them to maybe initially to identify what exactly is it that might be missing. And then you help them maybe to bridge that gap between where they want to be and where they are. Like can you explain more? What exactly is it that maybe that work with you involves?
Yeah, so I have over the years created certain mind models and metaphors and sort of trajectories that I think are beneficial for anybody of any gender in humanity, sort of like a guide to having your best human experience, or I used to call it evolutionary mastery for the modern man. And a couple of the components to that are, one, recognizing, as we often say in self-help, that 90 to 95% of our perceptual awareness is subconscious. The thoughts we think, the words we speak, the choices we make, and the habits we repeat are based on subconscious programming, aka it's below the level of our awareness. So often what happens when men or other people are trying to make changes, I tell them it's like being in a company with 100 employees and 5 of them are trying to make a change for the whole company. A lot of the other employees don't even know there is a change, and there might be employees in that company that are like just in resistance or not on board with that change. So it takes a lot of energy and effort over a long period of time with sometimes minimal results. So part of it is bringing that, expanding our awareness and opening up our, what I call authentic alignment, which is not who you think you should be in order to be approved of, or whatever you decided in childhood when that initial programming happened made you a good person, but figuring out what actually lights you up, figuring out what are your authentic wants, needs, boundaries, and values. Because if most men don't know, if I ask them, what are your authentic wants, needs, boundaries, and values? What lights you up? They're like, I don't really know. Or what they think it is something that's not actually their authentic self. So then if you don't know what your wants, needs, boundaries, and values are, if you don't know what makes you happy, it's much harder to examine the different areas of your life to see whether they're in alignment with what's going to light you on fire or not. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's, in a way, it could be you helping them to have all 100 employees being on board, and not only being on board, but supporting that
Yes.
change transition, just getting to their best life versus having just 5, and then you have to deal with resistance or something coming from the rest of like 95 of them. And that is something that, as you were speaking, I would just imagine that is kind of how alignment would look like. You don't have these like many sides of you just fighting with yourself. It means
Yeah.
it's seemingly smooth sailing
Yeah.
in a way. So can you explain more about magnetic masculinity? Because I think it is something that it sounds pretty cool, but what
Yeah.
it is, how does it look like?
So magnetic masculinity is sort of the embodiment of the divine masculine. It's a man not who's perfect, but who's in perfect alignment with where he is right now, and not behaving from those programs that we talked about, those subconscious programs, behaviors, and thoughts and patterns from childhood, but who's more aware of their multidimensionality. So if we look again at our metaphor of a company, I often tell people we want to bring all the characters of your personality out of the subconscious, give them a seat at the table of your consciousness or at the boardroom of your consciousness, so that you, as the CEO, can identify sort of which part of you is helpful in which situation. If you think about, when I talk about a multidimensional man or a multidimensional species, as we evolve out of the emotional dark ages, it's going to be more helpful for us to start thinking in that term of aspects of ourselves. An example of that is if you've ever tried to make a decision about something and you're torn. Why are you torn? Because part of you feels one way, part of you feels another way, part of you might be excited, part of you might be terrified, part of you might think you don't deserve it, part of you might think you do deserve it. And these parts, when they're subconscious and you're not sort of managing them as the CEO or working with them collaboratively, then it's, if we step into the law of attraction, or what people call manifestation, if you imagine you're trying to get to that one goal, again with that company, but you've got players that are in complete protest of it, and you've got players that are like, actually, we don't want that. You think you want to do this, but you don't actually want that. So they're digging their heels in. So sort of adopting this more multidimensional aspect and stepping into the magnetic power that comes with that authentic alignment and confidence. It's confidence, it's clarity, it's emotional mastery, it's skillful at relationships, it's powerfully vulnerable, and it's energized and inspiring to others, and able to find healthy ways to have their needs met, even their most selfish needs and desires, in a healthy way.
One thing that I was curious to ask you when it comes to coaching itself, did you know that you will be do coaching, or even that you want, or maybe how early did you know that you're somebody who wants to help people or wants to add value to people, or did just it just happened like naturally that you got into it?
A good question. I think it definitely happened naturally. I've always had a tendency to want to be of service to others and help others. But like I said, there's also a selfish incentivization in that I just want everybody to stop hurting each other so much so that we can all have more fun. And as a young child with Asperger's, I would watch um, these social interactions happening around me, and I would just observe them and think that we were an insane species, basically thinking, what we're doing isn't working. How do we make it better so we can all have more fun? And I think that, yeah, I think that when people are in their authentic alignment and they understand how to master their mind and train their brain, that we can all just enjoy life more. And that's always something that's been important to me. Also, as an empath or somebody who has a very highly developed emotional intelligence and sense of empathy, I just genuinely have a lot of compassion for other people. Also, being born with a very capable and gifted mind, I enjoy the challenge, I think, of just exploring and really getting to know each individual and finding out what makes them tick. And I get so much satisfaction out of transformation and watching somebody just completely experience their lives differently. Like, I just find it exciting. If I had $1 billion in the bank, I would keep doing exactly what I'm doing, because I just enjoy it so much. And I think it's not that there's anything wrong with where we're at in humanity. I accept that we're actually really rapidly evolving, but I think it's useful to teach people practical tools and tips and tricks to help them accelerate evolving out of the emotional dark ages.
What you just said about being excited about seeing each individual transformation, I think that's something that for me, it's admirable that you're not losing that sense, because I think a lot of times, even like with coaching or like if somebody's a therapist, you start to see patterns. And in a way, you start to assume that you understand a person, you know what's the solution, and you become kind of like automatic in your approach. What is it that maybe helps you to keep that curiosity and that individual approach like alive, where you don't get in that kind of pattern of, oh, I already know like what are the steps, and
Mm,
you just kind of guide people through the kind of system?
that's a really good question. Um, I love that you asked that question. I think there is benefit in identifying patterns, because at the end of the day, so two answers. I think there can be a benefit to identifying patterns, because at the end of the day, what we all want is love, belonging, acceptance, appreciation, and to feel energized and inspired and confident. So we have a lot more in common as a species than we tend to think we do. So there are certain assumptions that I do make. Like, I assume that everybody is doing their best. I assume that everybody deserves happiness. I assume that everybody is capable of changing. So there are some assumptions that benefit me. Now, how do I not try to put everybody in sort of a box, I think you might be saying, is that I just genuinely am curious. And I don't succeed unless my clients succeed. So if something isn't working, we're either using the wrong tool or I've made an incorrect assumption. So I do continuously challenge myself. And because, I mean, we do have to sometimes make assumptions or a hypothesis of what we think the problem might be. But then if it's not working, then I don't really care about being right. My ego doesn't care about being right. The only thing I really care about are results. So sometimes I have made assumptions and then thought, oh, wait a minute, I'm off base. I need to pivot here, or I need to ask more clarifying questions.
But you don't
And
have
then being
that.
willing to just go in with an open learner's mind,
Yeah.
and just assume that the result is going to happen. We're just not sure what the path to get to that result looks like, and it might involve, you know, I can accelerate that process often because I do identify patterns very well. It's one of my superpowers without putting somebody in a box, maybe. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think patterns or recognizing patterns is important, but something that I have seen out there, even like in the coaching space, is that once you identify all the patterns, you kind of now assume that, oh, I catch this pattern, so this person now goes into this category, and this is kind of the path for them to do, where it's not maybe as individualized. And I think it's something that it naturally happens because we like to maybe organize things in our mind and have these like structures, and keeping that balance between finding those patterns, but also staying curious and approaching each person individually. I think that's something that is um, maybe not as common, but it's really, really powerful, because then we all have these patterns. I think it's inevitable to have them.
Yeah.
But having that individual approach, I think it's really powerful and super helpful, even like for the person, because then they don't feel like they're just like, okay, I'm just like another number who's going through the system, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that, yeah, there's power both in individuality, but also in group, or which again, that's why I have these mind models or these metaphors or this basically trajectory. At some point, I would like to write a book of like, I don't know, I used to want to call it How to Un Yourself, but there's a book called that I found out. Or basically like a human or a divine soul's guide to knocking your human experience out of the park. How to experience evolutionary mastery or something like that, because I do think that there are core fundamental similarities, but how we get there and what tools work for us is where the individuality comes in, and and truly being curious about each person's story, but finding not only the beauty in their individuality, but their connection to the collective, because shame, which is the root of a lot of our less adorable coping mechanisms, requires isolation. So I do also find it helpful to tell people, trust me, you're not the only one that feels this way. And that can sort of bring them out of the individual into the we, and seeing themselves as a unique part of a larger connected puzzle of consciousness, although that's probably a whole separate episode for a different day.
But it is interesting how we a lot of times think we are very different, but actually we have so much in common that we're not even aware of.
Yes.
As long as at least that's one of the things that I have experienced, as long as I don't allow my ego maybe to get in a way, because I want to feel special and really different. But when I'm open, I start to see how similar we all are in so many ways. And that is something that can help us to come more together instead of not. So if somebody wanted to work with you, how would that look like? And where can they find you, get access to you?
I would love to comment on something you just said,
Yeah,
which
go
I think
ahead.
was a great perspective. And I just want to reflect something back when you talk about the ego wanting to feel special. I think there's, like with anything, there's sort of a shadow and a light side. Not that the shadow is a bad thing. I love the shadow. I love shadow work, as you know. Nothing makes me uncomfortable, really. And that we should feel special because you and I and everyone else are a unique, one of a kind, limited edition perspective of source consciousness. And that is special. So I love that I am special, and so's everybody else. And I think that sort of keeps us in line. But you're right that a lot of people have that perception of isolation or that perception of separation because they feel that they're the only ones that are going through that. And like I said earlier in this episode, I've sometimes had 2 or 3 men a day, very vulnerably share something with me that they had never shared with somebody before, and feeling horrified and thinking that they're the only one that feels that way. And I'm like, ho hum, tell me something I don't know, and I tell them that I'm like, you are probably the 7th man in the last 10 days that's told me that. Don't worry, you're not alone, but you are special, and so is everybody else. I think that's sort of that balance of acknowledging our special and owning our awesome. And also, because when we own that awesome and we own that unique, special gift in us, we're more likely to project that on others and acknowledge their unique, special, one of a kind, limited edition expression of source consciousness.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, I think in my head, that special was more of like, I'm better or I'm different.
Yes, that would be the unhealthy side of specialness. So specialness or being special itself, everything. And I've definitely been in that. I've been in both ends of that pendulum swing where I'm like, oh, look how special I am. And then I've also been in the I am not special, I'm nobody. So I've been in both unhealthy sides of that pendulum swing, which I think is sometimes a very valid way to find that healthy balance somewhere in between.
Yeah,
But you asked how people can get a hold of me. Is that what you? So you can go to my website, sandylsmith.com. You can go to one of the social media channels, the Magnetic Masculinity Movement. You can send us a DM. You can send us an email, info@sandylsmith.com. And what I really encourage everybody to do is right now, as part of my new year, as we're heading into 2024 and this year of like rebirth and leaving behind what no longer serves us, is I'm offering free strategy sessions where we sort of map out your unique magnetic masculinity blueprint. And if you go to my website and you click on Become a Client or Book a Strategy Session, you will be sent a questionnaire that will help you really start to get clarity on that authentic alignment, what's holding you back from it and separating the programming from the authenticity. And then in our call together, I use that information to help me provide as much value as I can in that time, independently of whether we decide that we're a match to work together or not.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Anything you want to add before we leave?
No, thank you. This is a lot of fun. And whoever's listening, I appreciate you. And I honor whatever your journey has looked like. And I celebrate everybody who's listening to something like this, because even if you're listening to something like this, you are an evolutionary leader and you are part of that head of the evolutionary curve, guiding us and helping us evolve out of the emotional dark ages by healing and working on yourself. And I really honor that. I think that's one of the most important things we can do for humanity.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I can't wait for future episodes as well, because there's just more and more coming.
That's good. I'm excited. I can't wait. Thank you.
Thank you. See you next time.
See you next time.